Have you ever been in a relationship with a fearful, avoidant attachment style and experienced that push pull, feeling like you're walking on eggshells and often feeling confused between those really peak moments of deep connection and things going so smoothly, followed by those roller coaster arguments or conflicts? Well, if this is something that you're experiencing, or if this is something that you find yourself doing in relationships, even as a fearful avoidant attachment style, today we're going to talk about the fearful avoidant attachment style's unhealthy relationship expectations. And if you stick around until the end, we'll talk about what you can actually do about these in an exercise that I'll share with you with examples so that it's tangible and that you can start applying these things immediately. Now, if you're new to this channel, my name is Thais Gibson. I'm the founder of the Personal Development School, and I spent about a decade in client practice working with people on healing their attachment style before creating the Personal Development School as an online community full of all sorts of courses to develop and improve our relationships. Now, in this video specifically, my goal for you by the end of this is that you will understand what expectations actually are and take away the key golden nuggets that they're giving to us, along with understand what to do with your own expectations if they come up in unhealthy ways, and how to make sure that you are not getting expectations from your attachment style or somebody else's attachment style in the way of a really thriving relationship with somebody that you care about and love. So I'll actually share a little slide here with you today, and we'll dig into some of this together so we can go through this exercise at the end. But essentially, fearful avoidant attachment style, if you're not already familiar, is one of four main attachment styles in relationships. One attachment style is a securely attached style, and the other attachment styles are insecurely attached. And all insecurely attached styles have different relationship expectations that they carry in that really aren't their fault, but still to some degree are their responsibility because they often come from some version of attachment trauma in childhood where we couldn't get our needs met, or we had to walk on eggshells, or we experienced some form of chaos. And you'll actually see as we go through today's video that the fearful avoidant attachment style, so many of their specific expectations actually represent deeply unmet needs that took place in their childhood. And so when we look at these expectations as adults, we can actually decode that expectations have so much to do with us not having needs met. And when we know this, we're empowered to actually communicate about those needs so that we don't get trapped in these cycles of conflict. So here's one of the first ones, and I'll actually break this down and give you a specific example. One of the first ones is this idea with the fearful avoidant that nobody should ever break their trust. Well, where does this come from? The deeply unmet need and the conditioned pattern. So in their conditioning, in terms of the, in other words, what conditioning is it's like our repetitive experience that will ultimately program us, that will ultimately dictate how we tend to expect things to go or view the world. So in their conditioning, fearful avoidants often didn't have trust, either because they had caregivers who didn't follow through on promises, or there was a lot of chaos and arguments and fighting, or perhaps they had a parent who struggled with addiction or alcoholism. And so there was a lot of like incongruency, right? One thing being said, another thing being done, or broken promises, or waiting for the other shoe to drop, which can also cause a lot of distrust between a parent and child. If everybody's always like on edge, for example. So, what happens is they expect at a deep level this sort of, oh my gosh, people are going to break my trust. And so they put this expectation of like, no, for me to be in a relationship that I am happy with and that's healthy, nobody should ever break my trust. So, really, what this represents is deeply unmet needs that aren't being conveyed effectively. So, what is the need? Well, the deep need is for loyalty. The need is for trust, right? It's to have consistency. I mean, there's really four C's of trust, not to go too far down the rabbit hole, but there's four C's of trust. When we have these four things, we tend to trust very effectively. When we have consistency, so somebody communicates consistently, shows up consistently. When we have congruency, so when what somebody says and what they do line up, right? Like I say, I'm going to be there to pick you up at 7 o'clock. I'm there to pick you up at 7 o'clock. I say that I'm going to call you when I'm done work. I call you when I'm done work. Like what I say and how I behave add up. Trust. When I say I'm going to call you and I never do, I say I'm going to pick you up. I never pick you up. it breaks trust in those areas, right? So we have consistency, congruency, we have consideration. When somebody considers your feelings, you trust that they're going to be mindful of you and you tend to let your guard down around them. And last but not least, when people give you context for things, if people just cancel plans all the time and don't tell you why or what's going on, you're like, wait, what's happening here? But if somebody cancels plans and they tell you, hey, it's because I'm under the weather, I'm not feeling well, I'd love to see you though, let's get together next week. We have context for things, right? They tell you the why behind things, we tend to trust more. So, anyways, if we could convert this into a need, the need would be for trust, often through these 4 C's of trust. Um, the next big expectation of a fearful avoidant is that their romantic partner should be as giving as they are. A lot of fearful avoidants come at relationships from a place of feeling unworthy, and they think that they constantly have to earn their worth. So what you'll often see is that they will pour into relationships, but they're often making sacrifices over compromises. So they're doing things to give, sometimes at the expense of themselves, rather than giving from checking in with themselves and seeing what they can actually give without going against themselves in the process. Just a clear example of this would be if I have $1,000 in my bank account and I want to do something nice and I give you $10, that might be something that I've considered, right? That feels good for me. I can give. I'm not really worrying too much. It's a small fraction of what's there. But if I have $1,000 in my bank account and I give you 900, I might be really stressed out afterwards, right? So when we do something from just compulsive giving, sometimes it's sacrificial, right? Sometimes it goes against ourselves. When we give something from a place of consideration of self, we tend to give in healthy ways. Often, fearful avoidant attachment styles are giving from a place of compulsive giving, trying to earn their worth to avoid the core wound of feeling unworthy or to avoid being abandoned. But what we can have is we can have somebody who has a romantic partner where fearful avoidance thinking, well, I'm giving sacrificially, so you should also be giving sacrificially, and they'll often feel really hurt and resentful if somebody's not giving in the way that they are giving. Again, the way to solve for this as a fearful avoidant is to actually convert this need into, or this expectation into, a need. So what do you actually need under here when you're expecting this? Well, maybe you need to communicate what it is that you would be looking for from a partner. Maybe you need to communicate that you can't always give so compulsively, or maybe you need to communicate your actual boundaries in a relationship. Maybe you need to communicate what specifically you're needing for support, right? Emotionally, mentally, etc., in a relationship. Moving on to this one. The romantic partner should always respect their independence, right? Fearful avoidants tend to think, well, you should just respect that I need time alone. But sometimes we have partners who need to hear it, need to hear something like, hey, I'm going to be busy for the next, few hours. I might be MIA for the next, 24 hours here. Well, I'm in this really busy time, but I'll check in tomorrow at this time, right? Sometimes they just need very specific communication so that your independence can be respected. But when we don't communicate, we just expect somebody should get it or should know. That's where we run into conflict later on. I just wanted to jump in and share something exciting. We are actually, for the first time ever, running a promotion for 60% off of your first month at the Personal Development School. And this gives you access to all of our courses, including all of the courses about different attachment styles and how to navigate those relationships together. So, for example, a fearful avoidant with a dismissive avoidant, how to really work through that relationship, all the different challenges, how to show up. We also have courses on boundaries, communication, healing your attachment style to becoming secure. So many different courses in there. But on top of that, I'm in there 3 days a week doing live webinars. So you can come in, ask me any questions that you have at any time, and I will be there to support you. And I'd love to chat with you. And we actually have trained coaches and facilitators who are in there all other days of the week except for Sunday. And there are community support events through them. There are webinars with them, smaller classes. So you have so much extra support in really integrating all of the materials and work in there. And I will say, as excited I am about the YouTube videos that we get to put out every single day, just because of the length of the courses and content, they're so much better than our YouTube content because you can go into so much more depth. There's workbooks, worksheets, and tons of support. So if you want to check it out and actually get 60% off of your first month for only $39 at the Personal Development School, I will put a link to access that down below. Another one, their partner should always be there when they need them, right? I think it's really important to have a standard in a relationship that we have a partner who wants to be there, who's going to show up for us, right? And I think that's really meaningful to have a high standard around that. But also, people will never be perfect, right? Sometimes people are going to go through chapters and seasons of life where they're going through personal difficulties. And so during those times when they're going through personal difficulties, sometimes what has to end up happening is that we're like, oh, they can't be there the way that I need right now, but I can be here for myself. I have other trusted people I can rely on because I built those strong relationships by communicating my needs. And maybe I'll be the support for this person for a period of time. And then when they come out of this challenging dynamic, I can turn around and then reconnect, right? Then I can ask them for what I need at that point in time. Partner should always make them feel wanted. Partner should be faithful in thought, emotion, opinion, and action. Again, we tend to outsource as an expectation what we're struggling to achieve in the relationship to self. So if I can't seem to recover from broken trust in childhood, then I'm going to expect when I get into partnership as an adult that somebody is completely perfectly loyal, never has another thought that goes against me, never speaks one word against me or vents about me to their parent or their friend. Otherwise, the relationship is off, right? And the reality is, people are going to make mistakes sometimes. And I think it's important to have really high standards so that we're not putting up with like cheating in relationships or constant violations of trust. But if somebody makes a mistake or tells a white lie as a one-off, once every couple years in a relationship, that's not really a good reason to end a relationship. Whereas that can be really triggering for a fearful avoidant who's struggling to find their own ability to trust and thus outsources it onto their partner to never break their trust to help them deal with their own trust wounds. But the reality is we want to deal with our own trust wounds so that we don't have to have a perfect partner to feel like we can trust. So anyways, what do we do? Especially if you're on the receiving end. Hopefully that's some good information if you're fearful avoidant for just some healthy adjustments to these expectations. But if you're on the receiving end, there are three big things that we can do. Number one, if somebody has an unhealthy expectation they're bringing into a relationship, we want to call it out directly. And this looks like being able to say to somebody, for example, hey, let's say we look at this one, for example, and the fearful avoidance really upset that they're giving in a sacrificial way, right? They self-sacrifice, they gave so much, even when they didn't have a lot to give emotionally or financially or mentally. And then in turn, you're in this position where you're going, wait a second here. Like, you're expecting me to sacrifice rather than compromise, right? So we would call it out directly, but in a gentle way. So we might say, look, I really appreciate how much you've given in this relationship. I know how much you show up, but at this time, I'm experiencing being asked to give something I don't have the capacity for right now. So you would actually call it out directly. Like, I cannot do that. That's not where I'm coming from. You can do it in a kind and respectful way. And then what you can say is you can ask what they need. So you might go on to then say, can you tell me specifically what you need? And I will check in with myself and see if I'm available to give that to you. And at the end of it, you might say, hey, I need for you to communicate what you need more directly rather than just expecting me to show up for things in a particular way because I can't read your mind in those cases, right? So you would communicate your needs as well. Maybe you need them to be more consistent with how they're communicating and more direct or communicate their needs. We'll do one more. Let's say my partner should, well, it's too similar. We'll do this one. The romantic partner should always respect their independence. So in that particular case, you might say, so let's say the fearful avoidant just went missing, right? Or is expecting you to understand their need for independence. And you're in a position where you're going, wait a second, you just went missing and I'm not okay with that. That doesn't feel good. So what you would say is, hey, I can understand that you might need some space, but I need you to tell me that directly if you're wanting space. And I would like for you to be able to check in with me at periods of time, even if you need more space in the relationship. I can respect your independence. I can hold space for you, but I also need to know that we're going to have time to really give to the connection in our relationship as well. And that could look like you having space a couple extra nights per week, but you being extra present during the 2 times a week, for example, that we do date, that we are together. And so what you're doing is you're finding a way to basically communicate about these expectations that are not being shared, address them directly so they're not causing an unhealthy conflict later, and then communicate what you need as well. Now, if this seems like it's a lot of information, I'm trying to fit like a good part of a course into this here, right? If you actually want to do a deep dive into the course with a workbook, with worksheets, with a lot more explanation, a lot more foundational steps, you can actually check out the conflict communication course in the personal development school. And I'll put the link down below, which will also give you access to the entire school at PDS, which essentially is a relationship school. It goes through all the different things that we need to personally develop ourselves, but especially to develop ourselves in terms of relationships, be it healthy boundaries, conflict communication, reprogramming our attachment styles to become secure, etc. So I will put that link. I hope you enjoyed this video. And if you want to do a much deeper dive, you can also come back here on a regular basis. I put daily videos out here, so don't forget to subscribe. Or I will see you in the school where we also have webinars, where if you have questions for me or anything like that, I'll be there throughout the week to answer your questions personally and provide that more personalized support. Thank you so much for watching.